Welcome to another episode of How I'm Building This, where we interview startup founders that are in the thick of building their startups. We learn from their mistakes and get practical tips to overcoming challenges. Today we have Ryan from Valqari. Ryan, how are you today? Thanks so much for joining.
Doing well, Prateek. Thanks so much for having me.
Of course, thank you. Ryan, before we jump into Valqari, I'd love to know who's Ryan, where did you grow up, and what really got you from being an airborne ranger to an interest in building your own business?
Oh, that's a great question. I grew up just outside of Chicago, in an area called Naperville. It was probably not the best location as a kid. It was not a lot going on, and so I was always looking for an escape, which led me to be a ranger. And then when I had gotten into the Army and deployed overseas, I had learned pretty quickly on that it just wasn't for me. I loved what my job was. I didn't love how we were using our skills. I didn't really resonate with the wars we were fighting, to be honest with you. So I was looking for something new. And when I realized I can use the technology that I had interacted with in the military to better people's lives instead of, take people's lives, it was a no-brainer for me. So that was when we kind of dove into drones at first 11 years ago.
That's cool. So was there like a pivotal moment, growing up that you thought that one day that you'd run your own startup?
No, not a shot.
Awesome.
I wanted to be a businessman.
Sorry, what was that, Ryan? You were breaking up there.
I'm sorry. I always knew I wanted to be a businessman, but never thought I'd be running my own company that I started.
Very cool. I did see on Crunchbase, that you'll raise $7 million. Why raise money and why raise 7 million?
So in our case in particular, and in most hardware cases, it's really expensive. It is a very, very expensive proposition to start R&D, prototyping, any kind of design when it comes to any kind of deep tech hardware. Quantum computing, all of us in these kind of deep tech industries are seeing how expensive it really is. And so it's almost impossible to do that on your own as a, sole founder, sole inventor, whatever it may be. And so it's almost a requirement to be able to get the capital to build the team. I had saved up some money in my previous roles that I thought was going to get us bootstrapped a little bit longer, but it's very expensive. And that only lasted so long.
Got it. So how did you decide that these were some of the investors that you wanted to work with?
It's trial and error in a lot of it. It's a lot like dating in a lot of ways, right? I mean, do you get along, and you kind of you start small and kind of work your way up, but you find that certain investors have the vision, they have the same mindset, they want to see you succeed, and they're not necessarily looking to, take their cut off of your cut, right? They want to see zero turn into one, not turn it into a zero-sum game. Those are the investors I tend to really align with well, and we tend to have a really great relationship. But the early days, you're looking for people that just believe in you.
Sorry, the last piece again was breaking up, Ryan.
I'm sorry. I said a lot of the early days, your friends and family, your angel rounds, you're just looking for people that believe in you, people that support your track record, people that have known you in past roles and in a past, anything really, that just will take a chance on you. And not a lot of people have the ability, the means, and the belief in a founder. Usually that's a very small group, so you have to tap it wisely.
Yeah, that's for sure. On your website, Ryan, you say that you've created a practical solution for the last inch of the last mile. What is the pain you're solving and for whom?
So one thing we'll see, and everybody with COVID probably saw it. Our last mile logistics network is already at its peak, right? We are tapped, and it is as uh, pushed as far as it can go, both from an infrastructure side, from a labor side, from just a sheer technological side with trucks and everything else and the efficiency of them. And we're seeing these inefficiencies in things like Uber Eats, right? Why would I have a person drive 5 miles to go pick up a hamburger and fries and then drive it another 5 miles to my house? I mean, that's a giant vehicle with a person driving a very small payload, very inefficient, right? And so I've always seen drones as an extension of our last mile that we don't currently have. And with Valqari's piece, the infrastructure, um, that really is the last inch, right? Because even if a drone, a person, or whatever brings it to your doorstep, um, you still have to worry about theft. You still have to worry about damage. You still have to worry about weather, right? Storing that package, all the things that have driven up tens of billions of dollars in package loss and theft and waste every year. That's the last inch that isn't really solved yet. And we're really hoping that our product, along with drones being adopted, is what really kind of makes porch piracy a thing of the past.
Yeah, I see that. So how did you get your first few customers, that were willing to pay you to solve their problem?
It's been very trial and error. I don't know that I would recommend
Sure.
going into a highly regulated industry to anybody. When we started this back in 2013, working on the idea, I mean, they didn't even have drone regulations. And then all of a sudden, we saw drone regulations from the FAA in 2014, 2015. And we've kind of been under those same regulations for the last decade. And we're just seeing in this last FAA Reauthorization Act a few weeks ago the first kind of light at the end of that tunnel for next year. And so um, it was very, very difficult, not necessarily proving the concept of what we've built, but more so convincing large Fortune 500 customers to spend money on it, knowing it was still going to be a highly regulated industry for the next few years. So that was a challenge. That was probably one of the biggest challenges. Um, and then now that we're seeing this new light at the end of the tunnel with the FAA Reauthorization Act, it's really kind of shed some new light, some new blood into this industry. And we're kind of seeing an uptick again. So I'm really excited about what the next 18 months of this industry is going to be.
Yeah, that's for sure. So you get your first few customers. How do you go about building like a feedback loop with them that helps you to essentially iterate that much faster?
Over communication. So we sent our first products to um, pretty much partner customers, more or less. These were groups we had very close ties with. It was almost like a invite only kind of beta. And we just over communicated with them. What's working? What's not? Is your drone landing okay? Is there any issues when we're centering? Is there any issues when you're dropping the package? And we sent half a dozen systems around the country just to get feedback from different groups. And it was invaluable. It was invaluable.
So around the last part, again cut off.
I'm sorry. I said it was really invaluable. It's one thing to talk about it and whiteboard it, but to get actual on the ground, their product integrating with ours feedback, we couldn't have gotten any other insights in the level or quality that we did doing it any other way.
Yeah, I see that. Yeah. So based upon your website, I've seen that that you're selling to the government. You say that is selling to a few into a few like private companies. How do they find out about you?
We've been fortunate in the sense that because we were in this so early and so long that we've been at this, that we've built a bit of a reputation. People know to come to Valqari when they're looking for infrastructure, when they're looking for these types of systems for drones. And so a lot of the times when you get somebody that starts doing their research and looking into, what are the different options out there, they end up finding Valqari. I tend to be pretty vocal and do podcasts and things and spread our message. And that has worked. It's gotten around, and we've been very, very, I would say, light in our marketing budget. We've done a lot more word of mouth business than we have traditional marketing, placing ads in different programs or LinkedIn or whatever, and getting customers that way. It's always been word of mouth and referrals.
Understood. Understood. So that being said, though, like today, as you think about, I'm like your sales motion, what does that sort of look like from like an outbound perspective, as well as from like an inbound perspective?
So we're in a unique case where a drone system, right, a network for a large company, I mean, that could take 6 months and up to a year sometimes to really install, pilot, proof out. So we tend to have fewer, higher quality customers than to try and I did that for a little bit. I would say 21 to 22 we tried that, blasting out our
Okay.
products and seeing who would integrate with them. But we realized our product is a bit too specialized. It's a bit too tailored in a way, and so it became much easier to build coordinated systems kind of holistically for a few customers than to try and just sell landing stations to existing networks. So we really kind of focused in on larger, higher quality clients instead of kind of the ups and downs we experienced with companies that were kind of our size or smaller.
Yeah. So when it comes to these like bigger businesses, of course, that I'm assuming that your sales cycles must be crazy long. How do
Brutally.
you, how do you yeah, I mean, how do you keep them engaged? How do you ensure that they end up trialing? How do you ensure that they end up finally signing up and then, of course, becoming like a paid customer?
It's I tend to equate them to cruise ships, right? They don't turn quickly. They don't make quick moves. We're in a little bit of a speedboat right now, right? So a lot of the times it's just staying in front of them and then kind of riding that wake, being in their ear, reminding them you have the solution for what they're looking for. It's just oftentimes the procurement, the bureaucracy, the things that go with larger Fortune 500, large governments. It's never one guy that can just say, yeah, I'll take that, right? They always have to go through layers and
Yeah.
layers and layers of approval, and you got to submit all kinds of proposals. And so oftentimes just the cadence of that tends to be kind of keeping the communication consistent. But oftentimes we found it's just a very long sales cycle and there's no real way around it. We found it shortening. It used to take 2 years. Now it's taking maybe 6 months. But it's still a very, very long sales cycle.
Yeah. So how did you change it from a 2 year sales cycle now down to 6 months? Like, is there something that you're doing tactically that is essentially, I mean, like reducing the time to buy?
I wish it was something I was doing. Realistically, I think it's more the regulations. These companies are obviously seeing that regulations are about to come next year. It's going to be very much so, uh, you know, uh, big dynamic shift. It's going to be a real paradigm shift across a lot of just industries. And what we found is whether you're in medical, whether you're in last mile fulfillment, whether you're in, just corner store convenience, quick service restaurants, it doesn't matter. Last mile impacts your supply chain and it impacts how you get your product to your customer. And so there's really not an industry yet we have found that can't benefit from this in some way. Even if you're in a remote mining operation, oftentimes you need to get tools and equipment and food and supplies to people out in the mines, right? And so there's all kinds of applications here that we're finding, and I have not spoken to somebody in an industry yet that uh, really doesn't find some impact in this. But again, it's finding the people that will be good customers, right? You often hear people say it's okay to fire your bad customers. Well, there's a lot of bad customers when you're a startup, right? There's so many pitfalls that you could go down where, oh, this sounds like a good idea. It's a shiny, glowing object, right? And then you go after it and you guys fall on your face, right? You have to be pragmatic about how you choose your customers, especially the earlier you are.
Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, like from my perspective as well, yeah, I've gone through those exact same motions of my first few customers not being the best, and then of course over time, figuring out who those right customers were. And it's not just about winning the new customer; it's about retaining also the new customer. So how do you ensure that customers stay with you, not just through, of course, contractual terms, but through the business model?
It's something that I found is just good old fashioned business fundamentals, good customer service, answering the phone when they
Yeah.
call, being available, right? Picking up the phone at 6 p.m. sometimes. Um, it's those little things that really go the extra mile. And no matter what industry I've worked in, that's always been the differentiating factor. Most small businesses, restaurants, and this and that. I mean, they're kind of edging each other out on those little soft skills, right? The how they treat their customer, the turnaround time, the things like that. It's not always the product itself. And so I found that oftentimes just being a kind person and showing respect is the best way you can do that.
Yeah, that's for sure. One of the things that I also found was that, of course, through the customer success piece of it, being available for them, that was a big thing. Of course, the product has to work, that goes without saying. But besides that, all these things definitely add up. But beyond that, what I really found interesting is that these happy customers then start referring their own network. So how do you think about referrals, and have you created some sort of a referral program or like a partner program for you?
We have considered stuff like that because we more or less are working with so few customers. It's we look to we look to have our customers expand their current operations more so than adding new customers at the moment. I would imagine sometime next year we're gonna, put more emphasis on growing our customer size or the number of customers. But right now it's mostly growing the existing customers we have and not necessarily taking on too many more new ones. So I know that's a bit of a challenge for a lot of companies. It's something I found is hardware is very different than SaaS, for instance, right? You hear like, oh, your first month, you got to get 10,000 users. It's like, if I had 10,000 customers, that is a 10-year goal, right? But the system costs and everything else are very different. And so, it makes sense, but it's still, a lot of the software models that have been pushed for the last 15 years don't apply at all to hardware.
I see that. I see that. That's fair. So you said that you'd rather work with a limited number of customers, expand on them, and of course build from there. So today, when you are going out to, of course, find new customers, what does that outbound sales motion look like for you?
Actually, we've done very, very little outbound. We've been fortunate enough to survive entirely on inbound, and that's because of the word of mouth, because of the referrals and the excitement building in the industry. But we found that we stay busy with just the people that are knocking on our door, and we haven't had to do a whole lot of outbound yet.
That's amazing. Wow. So when you say inbound, have you been doing the typical motion in like terms of SEO ads, things like that, or what are some of the things that are working for your inbound game?
Some I wish we were better at SEO, and we haven't done any ads. It's truthfully been a lot of thought leadership, speaking on the industry. Not to toot my own horn, but I tend to get invited to a lot of drone related speaking events. I've just been in this industry very very long time, and so just kind of building kind of where this vision of the industry is going and being a part of that conversation has done very well for us. At the
Yep.
same time, though, I am seeing the market mature, and we are seeing more and more companies rely on just good old fashioned trade shows and ads, right? And those companies are doing great in this industry. And so being in the package delivery side, we're kind of the last phase of drones being adopted. So we're kind of riding the wave in a lot of ways. But a lot of companies that are doing outbound in this industry are starting to do outbound, have been seeing success. So I'm very much leaning towards doing that in the near future. It's just we haven't needed to at this point.
Got it. So are you all also attending like a lot of trade shows and events to get your name out today?
Not as many these days, but what we found is there are a lot of great drone trade shows, and there's even more popping up. But what they've become is more or less industry shows. I've never met a customer at a drone show. When we go to customer shows, right? Whether it's quick service restaurants, whether it's the golf or the medical or the emergency management industries, that's where all our customers are, and not so much, hey, we're at this drone show, look at how cool our stuff is compared to your stuff. I mean, I've found that tends to be almost like a playground pissing contest, and not really good for driving value.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. So through these years, Ryan, I'm assuming that you've made mistakes that you wish, of course, that you hadn't. Um, what would some of those mistakes be?
Yeah, where to start, right? I mean, you're always learning by trial and error when there's no playbook. Um, I would say some of my biggest failures were on the hiring side. I've learned the hard way that um, oftentimes people are exactly who they present themselves as, and they're not going to change. Um, and so oftentimes, whether it's performance improvement plans or you kind of see that spark in somebody and you're kind of hoping that it turns into something, it rarely does as much as I wish it did. Oftentimes I took chances on the wrong people. A lot of our early hires were difficult, and looking for the people I thought we needed were not the people we needed. I've learned very quickly that you can't have passengers in a startup. You just can't. Everybody has to be a driver. And I saw people coming in, and you don't see it right away. It takes a few months, right? But you'll see people that are coasting, and they're just waiting for that payday. And oftentimes with startups, there is no payday, right? I mean, you could just 90% fall on their faces, right? And so those people tend to really be much bigger anchors than people really see, myself included. Oftentimes people that have only worked in the corporate sector have been very hard to adapt to the culture. They're used to a lot of infrastructure, a lot of resources, and not having to wear so many hats. And so, when you're a garage startup, that's not necessarily the right mix. And so I would say one of the biggest areas I've worked on for myself is my vetting and hiring process, because I did make so many mistakes in that group.
Yeah. So what are some of the things, of course, that you've done, done there from the hiring side of it? I mean, I think like if there's one thing that I see working with startups all the time is that people seem extremely promising. We hire them, and then we figure out down the road that holy shit, they were just not the right people. And now, yes, we wasted so much time, we wasted so much money, all of that good stuff. And then, of course, that you learn from there. But what are some of the things that you have done today that is helping you to ensure that you have the right hires?
It's been a lot on the vetting side, particularly focusing on soft skills or kind of character traits. One of the issues that we were finding, especially after COVID, was a lack of resiliency and grit. A lot of people we had were coming in, and they would find a challenge that seemed very tough. And, it was a tough challenge. But they didn't have the skill set or the intestinal fortitude to overcome that. They crumbled. I've seen it happen far too many times where, people hit a wall and they just splat against the wall. They don't try and figure it out. They don't try and jump over it or work a plan. They hit the wall, right? And so a lot of our hiring has become more of a, do you have grit? Tell us about when you had overcome a challenge. Talk to us about something you've done that is kind of impressive in the way you overcame an insurmountable challenge. And so finding those people were really critical. But one of the key questions I found, particularly on interviews, is, if we need you to clean the bathrooms, will you clean the bathrooms? And you'd be surprised how many people would just go, no, I will not clean bathrooms. I was hired for X and that's what I do. Right. And again, we're a garage startup a lot of the ways that we operate. And if you use those bathrooms, you should be willing to clean the bathroom after yourself. Right. And so if you're not the kind of person that's willing to clean up after yourself, you're probably not the kind of person that's going to handle the big challenge as well either. And so that one has been surprisingly very poignant in finding who's a team player and who isn't.
That's awesome. Ryan, what advice do you have for aspiring founders? Like, what are some of the things that before they jump into becoming an entrepreneur that they should potentially think through? Because I know for a fact that this is not for the faint of heart.
Oh, no, I would say being a ranger was probably a little bit less of a challenge than this at times. This is a battle. But yeah, no, it's. I would tell any founder that when you hire engineers, when you hire accountants, when you hire any specialized role, you need them to be an ace of their trade, right? It is your job as the founder to be not even just a jack of all trades, but even more, right? The more you can understand your own books, the more you can understand your own technology, the more you can understand your own marketing, right? It's going to make things go a lot easier. I found that whether it's through hiring the wrong person or, you partner with the wrong group or whatever the challenge you're in at the time, oftentimes if you understand the situation, you can work your way out of it. It's when you don't understand the situation that you kind of get, just kind of rolled over on and you get bamboozled oftentimes, right? And so, if you're not familiar with legal stuff, and nobody's saying you got to go and get your JD, but if you can understand and read your own contracts, that is a big leg up over a lot of people. And so just really, the more you can be familiar with, not necessarily an expert in, but familiar, the more dangerous you're going to be, the more of an asset you're going to be to your organization. And so I would say learn as much as possible in every conceivable field you possibly can, because you'd be amazed how many self-reinforce when you're looking at two different things. It's almost coincidental how many things overlap.
Yeah, that's for sure. The one thing that's not spoken too loud is about managing founder mental health. How do you keep your mental health in check?
I would say that's probably one of the biggest challenges, and the longer you're at it, the worse it gets in a way, or I guess the swings start magnifying. I've been at this 11 years, and I can definitely say that it's more of a challenge today than it was 10 years ago. And it's difficult because you might have the best news ever, and then 10 minutes later you have an emergency you've got to deal with, and you can't even celebrate, right? And so not getting too high on the highs, not getting too low on the lows, and riding that middle is where I found is the most manageable. But that takes everything from working out, mental health, awareness, and kind of knowing when you're getting into a burnout space or when you're kind of going through one of those. And one of the biggest challenges I found is maintaining my social circle, right? Oftentimes I'm the type that's like, no, I'm just going to work through the weekend, and we'll get to that when I'm done with this. But you find that weekend after weekend after weekend, and then next thing you know, you're just not invited anymore. But having those support circles, having those friends, it's really important in being able to kind of just sound out what you're dealing with and work through it. And so I would say that as a founder, it's almost what's the best way to put it? It goes against every fiber of your being to take time off and to go and like just hang out and to like take time where you're not thinking about your business, but it's probably one of the most important things you can do for your mental health.
That's for sure. One of the things that I found was, joining groups like EO, for example, or just building that circle with other folks who are also building their businesses just makes it that much simpler, because they can also sort of understand what you're going through, because they're sort of going through it as well. So that's one of the things that I know has like worked for me now. It's been a while. I mean, just as you said, those highs are so high, those lows are so low, and finding that middle ground has been so difficult. But what I found is, yes, having that circle of now friends, who are also, of course, building their business, just makes it that much easier. Exercise and all of that good stuff, of course, all of that helps, but these are some of the other pieces of it.
It's true. The founder journey is unlike anything I've ever gone through in my life, and it is a very, very lonely journey. And most people have no concept of what you're going through, and as much as they kind of think they do, they have no idea. Um, it's a battle. It's a battle on a daily basis, both against what you're fighting against and yourself, right? You got to keep your own discipline, your own routine going, and not let it get you. And so, yes, having founder friends that are going through it is probably one of the most important things, because, yeah, I mean, you nailed it. I talk to my friends and they're like, what? They don't have the stresses of, having to make the next payroll or closing a fund or, whatever you need to do. That's a challenge for them. It's kind of almost a daily, a weekly thing for a founder. And it's hard to relate.
Yeah, it is. It is for sure. But it's such a fulfilling journey more than anything else. But Ryan, this has been so interesting. What's next for you? What's next for Valqari? And how can, of course, folks keep up with you?
Yeah, I appreciate that. We find us on LinkedIn, find us at Valqari.com. Please reach out and connect with me. We're really excited. We have a very, very big customer install coming that we're really excited about, in a new area that we haven't been working in as heavily before. So we've been putting all the hours into getting this going for the past, I'd say, 6 months. And that's going live next week. So we're extremely excited about that. And you will be hearing about that more in the coming weeks.
That's amazing. Well, Ryan, this has been such a fun chat, such great learning. Thank you so much for giving me some time today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me, Prateek. This has been great.
Of course.